So my biggest advice is just learn your work. A lot of these guys are complaining about, the rates, but they don't understand that they're competing with companies that don't even know their worth.
Welcome to This Week in Trucking. I'm Amy. Today we are joined by Anthony Lanciano, founder of A&M Freight Management LLC, to get the real insights on how you can book better loads. But before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Thank you for joining us today, Anthony. Let's start with your own journey. How did you get into trucking and how did you get to founding A&M Freight Management?
Well, the trucking part's a long story. So trucking's always kind of been part of what I wanted to do when I was younger. I was definitely pushed into a different direction by family when I was a teenager and the whole 9 yards. But I still wound up, becoming a truck driver around 19, 20 years old. And then got my Class A CDL when I was 21, and the story wrote itself from there. At 23, I believe, is when I bought my first truck, and I founded my trucking company and went out on my own. And I did that for about 10 years. And then 3 years ago, I opened up my freight brokerage as a secondary form of income. My wife was my partner in it. And then about a year and a half ago, certain medical issues arose, both within myself, severe nerve damage that I have, causing my left side to be pretty much completely numb on my left leg from the hip down. And then also some family health issues as well, a couple members of my household family. So I had to be around a lot more. So basically that caused me to shift into just being a broker instead of being both parties at the same time.
As we know, negotiating rates can be tough. In your experience, what are the three most common misconceptions small carriers have about profit margins or negotiating rates? And what are your best tips for them to negotiate more effectively?
The best tip I could probably give all carriers, especially owner-operators, is learn how to evaluate your time and your labor. As a trucker, I always knew what my operational costs were. And then I also, aside from my operational costs, I knew what my time was worth. My time away from my family, my time away from home, my time sleeping in a 48-inch bunk, week in and week out. And I was open deck. I was primarily step deck operator. So, tarping and chaining and all that stuff. There's a lot that goes into your price valuation on any particular load. But then on the broker side, I look at freight from, I guess, a little bit of a different perspective because I prefer to hire the better carriers. I'm not a bottom dollar, chase to the bottom kind of guy, and my customers know that too. I lose a lot of freight to TQL over that because TQL will beat me out by $300-400 a lane, but that's fine because the guys that they send in are usually subpar and don't get the job done properly, and then brings the customer right back to me. Especially if it's a new lane or even a lane that I've ran before, but for a different mode of transport. Like instead of it being a flatbed, it's going to be a hot shot. Or what I do is I'll post a load open for bid before I even give my customer a price. And I'll take in 10 to 15 bids from different carriers that know their worth. And then I'll add my percentage on top of that, and then give that price to the customer. I cannot tell you how many companies call me and they don't know how to give me a bid. They don't know. They just want to know what I'm willing to offer, or they want to know what the lowest bid is. And I don't give the lowest bid information out to these carriers because, one, just because they're the lowest bid, it doesn't mean that I'm going to take that bid to my customer, because if I now cross-section that with their motor carrier history, I look at their vehicle maintenance history, I look at what kind of violations they have. That plays a big part in who I hire too. Of course I can get a cheaper carrier with a million different vehicle maintenance violations and roll the dice and see if they're going to get to the receiver before they get put out of service by DOT or something like that. And those are headaches that my customers don't need, and they're headaches that I don't need, especially as an ex-owner operator. So my biggest advice is just learn your worth. A lot of these guys are complaining about, the rates, but they don't understand that they're competing with companies that don't even know their worth. And when you're dealing with a larger corporate operation, style brokerage, like, the 3-letter agencies that are out there, or some of those bigger guys, they'll take advantage of that. They're going to take full advantage of a guy not knowing what his time and money is worth, and they're going to try to push for the lowest bid, and then that's what that load's going to move for. And now, even if that customer doesn't go back to that other company for the next load, they're still expecting the rate to be similar to that first rate, which causes conflict of interest, within the industry. And I think that's the biggest, from my point of view, the biggest aspect of this industry is owner-operators not knowing how to run a business. They know how to drive a truck. They know how to secure freight. They know how to do everything great except for running the business and maintaining profitability even during the downtimes. And then those are the guys that do know how to run their business and do know what their worth is. They're competing against the same pool, and it leaves little justification for the smaller brokerages like myself to raise the price on the customer, because the customer is like, well, this broker said they could do it for this much. So why am I going to pay you $400 or $500 more, to do the same thing that this broker said they could do? And that's pretty much my biggest advice. I think the biggest fallacy is assuming that brokers they should only be making $50 a load. Maybe 15 years ago before the inflation, sure. But the biggest fallacy is the minimum or that bottom, you should only be taking $50 a load. The expenses on the brokerage end, I used to think the same thing, by the way. I used to be sitting in the back of my sleeper. I thought I could run a brokerage from my sleeper on my 10-hour split, and I thought it was, there's nothing to it, right? Well, I was so wrong about that. We do cap our percentage. So my company caps at 20%. If we ever find if we bid a load to a customer and we find a carrier that is willing to hold that load, that puts us over 20% profit margin, that customer automatically gets discounted on the back end. That is one of our winning strategies that has been helping us in the industry obtain new customers, because you have companies that are, taking 30 to 40%, and that's not right either. I've caught brokers doing that to me on my trucks, and it never sat right with me either. Even if I was to come up with the price and I agreed to a price and I was happy with the price, this happened especially on some military freight back when it used to pay really good. The military bills of lading, they always show what they paid to get that freight moved. So you'll agree to a price, even if I was the one, the broker never negotiated, I was the one to say, hey, I'll do it for X amount of money. Okay, no problem. Send you the rate con. I get to the military station, I load up, they give me the bill of lading, and all of a sudden I'm seeing on the bill of lading that they paid, that broker made 40 to 50% on my load, even though I'm the one that created the price and it was a price I was happy with, it still didn't sit right with me. So that's what I brought into the brokerage, is basically running an ethical business. This isn't the Wolf of Wall Street. This isn't get rich quick and try to steal as much money as you can. This is about keeping everybody happy as best as you can. You can't keep everybody happy, but you do the best you can as a smaller family-owned business, while still trying to compete with the Goliaths that are out there that are, running their business unethically.
Definitely. And when you're looking at the industry and in your experience, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see small carriers making when trying to secure consistent freight and actually build a reliable, profitable business?
Relationships. Your network is your net worth. I believe Grant Cardone is the founder of that saying. So your network's your net worth. And if I have a load for $1,000 and I book it with a carrier that looks reliable, they look, their vehicle maintenance history is up to par and everything's good to go, but yet all of a sudden another broker pops up and has a load for $1,300, and you bail on me. Now I look stupid to my customer. That is a big no on both sides. Even on the broker side, I'm the same way. I have guys calling me if I'm in the process of waiting on a rate confirmation to be signed. That rate confirmation is not even signed yet. I'll have carriers calling me up because I don't take the load posting down until the rate confirmation is signed, just in case. I'll have carriers calling me up, say, "Oh, I'll do it for $100 less than that guy did it." No, I'm not going to do that, because I can't stand when carriers do it to me, so I won't do it to a carrier. Burning bridges is probably one of the worst things you can do in any business of any industry, no matter where you are in the country or in any country. Your network is your net worth. And when you start burning bridges, you're going to go under fast because you're going to be left with the scraps at the end of the day. Chasing all the gold today is going to leave you with the scraps tomorrow if you're burning the bridge from each side of the cliff.
And then we know as a small carrier, you want to stand out. From your side as a broker, what are you looking for when onboarding a new carrier? We also talked about vetting them. What are some of your strategies for vetting carriers?
Vetting carriers on paper, we're basically left with the typical tools, carrier 411, carrier watch, and stuff like that. I know a lot of carriers hate carrier 411, and I understand why in regards to certain aspects of it. I kind of know a little bit more of what to look for in a carrier. Like if I see this guy's got 30 violations, but they're all minor things. And it was a power only, you talk to the guy, listen, it was a power only trip. And the customer's trailer that I was pulling, that's where all the violations were. And the truck is fully maintained. And then, so to look, okay, let me go to the next DOT inspection and see if there's any violations on that one. Okay, no violations on that one. So that proves the theory that it was the customer's trailer that was an issue and it wasn't his truck. Vetting on paper is basically just, what kind of DOT violations do you have? How old is your authority? Do your numbers match? Does the phone number match to who's calling? That 6-month rule to a year rule that a lot of brokers have. I don't typically enforce that all the time. I understand why it's there. There's been a lot of fraud in the industry. It's why I didn't sell my MC number because the last thing I needed was for it to backfire on me and deal with all these, new MC numbers that, you look at the company history and they're 10 years old, but the MC's only, a month old. And the guy on the phone with you, he's a dispatcher from somewhere else and the phone number doesn't match. And then you try to get in touch with the phone number that's on there and then they're not answering the phone, stuff like that. Those are red flags. And that's pretty much the on paper vetting. In regards to carrier vetting, how professional are you? Do you hold yourself in a professional manner, even on the phone? Do you speak professionally? Do you focus on, your customer service aspects, or are you just, trying to get another load on you to get out of the area and you really don't care about how you sound? You really don't care about how you present yourself to the shipper or the receiver. My customers, they are my bread and butter. They're how I feed my family. So if I send somebody in there that makes me look bad, I'm going to lose that customer. So professionalism is one of the biggest, most important things. And then your company should be lettered and numbered. You can get it for $10 on Amazon now. It's not hard to letter and number your truck. Don't go showing up to a site with a blank truck or somebody else's numbers on you. The whole lease purchase loophole, the gray area, that I don't play games with that stuff. If you show up, if I hire a company and a truck shows up with a different name on, you're getting thrown out of there. Every carrier has to send me a picture. The driver from his cell phone has to send me a picture of his truck on site at my shippers before I give them any sort of release number information or stuff like that. Or for some of the farmers that I work with, I let them know who's coming in. And if somebody else comes in with a different company name, I get a phone call and it gets sorted out. That's basically how I've learned to prevent the double brokering issues and even the lease purchase issues. Even if this guy's got a lease agreement with that company, but he's being made to carry his own insurance, which is, under my understanding, not fully legal either. I want that carrier's COI. I want a contract with the guy who showed up. I don't need the contract that I have with the company that I hired is irrelevant at this point because a new carrier showed up with a completely different company name on his truck with a completely different insurance policy. So I want his insurance policy. I want his company information. I want my contract to be between him and I want to pay him. I don't want to pay this illegal, third party guy that's just trying to, skim a couple of dollars off the top, because that's one of the things that the double brokers started doing when I started catching guys. Originally they would, rebroker a load and they just wouldn't pay the driver. And then they were getting caught and that was putting it was putting an end to the scam really quick because once they got caught not paying the loads, it was like a 30-day scam. What they started doing is they started doing stuff like what Landstar does. They hire out, they'll hire out somebody else for a lower amount, and then they will discount the price, and everybody still gets paid, so no red flags are thrown, nothing happens. And unless you're like me, where you're asking for pictures of the truck and the trailer on every single load, you're not going to catch it right away. Yeah. Especially if the guy's still getting paid, because he's none the wiser. He doesn't know. So I've caught a couple guys with that as well. Advice-wise, is just be professional. Be the most professional person you could be on every, you wake up in the morning, every conversation you have is a sale. That's how you should be looking at life in general. Every conversation you have with somebody is a sale. And you want to be as professional as you can so that you impress everybody,
On that note, can you tell us one story about how you caught some fraud going on?
When I was really young in the business, one of my loads actually did get double brokered. And when the guy showed up, the guy wound up showing up a day early. And that's how I caught that one. The customer called me. He's like, listen, the guy's a day early, this and that. I'm like, send me a picture of the truck. And the truck didn't match. I'm like, well, those were red flags, and we had to wind up. And this particular guy, he was promised, it was like a $2,400 load, and the guy was promised $5,000 for the load. And he was young in business too, so he didn't understand to look out for those red flags. Like, hey, listen, every single load is going for $2.50 a mile. Why is this particular load going for $5 a mile? And it's general freight. It's not hazmat. It's not nothing special. Why is this going for so much more? Let me dig in and make some phone calls and make sure that it's legit. So he was a little young with that as well. But also, like I said, especially like with my farmer customers that don't require release numbers to pick up a load, I'll tell them who's coming in. Hey, listen, this company is coming in. Make sure the company name is on the side of the truck. And then a couple of those instances, I got the phone call where, hey, listen, this is the truck that showed up. They have the paperwork. Your letterhead has been cropped out of the paperwork. I know your bill of ladings, what they look like, and why is your name not in this box where it normally is, and why does it say this name on here? And so then, I had to get in touch with the driver, who then put me in touch with his boss, the owner of his company, and we sorted it out where, hey, listen, you got screwed. I'm getting screwed. I'm paying you. I'm paying you directly. Same thing with the first guy that got, he got screwed. Obviously, I couldn't pay him the $5,000, that he was promised. That was because it's not what I had in it. But I didn't make $1 off that load. So I'm like, you know what? You got screwed. I got screwed. We all got screwed. You're the one that spent the fuel money. You're the one that put the wear and tear on your truck. I said, I'm just going to give you everything I have in the load. And I didn't take any profit off it because that's how I operate. I believe in operating in a way where when you take care of other people, they're going to come back and take care of you. That's just how everybody should operate.
Yeah, and I think that's the basis of actually creating reliable partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've built my business, especially in a couple different lanes, where a lot of times my loads don't even touch the load boards anymore because I have that list of reliable carriers that I've used before, and these are guys that when they need more money on a load because fuel went up, I don't hesitate. I just, even if I can't ask my customer for more money on this particular lane right now because they're capped out, if I saw fuel just spiked 15 cents a gallon, and the guy wants $50 more, okay, no problem. If you've taken care of me for the last 6 months without, one word of one complaint, guess what? It's time for me to take care of you. Punctuality and professionalism. You're taking care of when you tell me you're going to be someplace, you better be there. And I'm like that with my own kids. All right. I'm like that it's not just business. I'm like that with everybody I know, every person that I associate with, because I hold myself to the same standard. If I say I'm going to be someplace, I'm going to be there. And if some extenuating circumstance happens where I can no longer commit to that obligation, I don't let it go by the wayside. I make phone calls. I'm on the phone telling the person I promised, what's going on. And then I take it a step further and I go and see if there's somebody else that can handle my obligation that I promised. In trucking, when I was an owner operator, there wasn't many times where this happened, but like one time I woke up, I was supposed to leave at 4 a.m. to head off the island, go pick up a load in Jersey. And I woke up, I had 103-degree fever. I woke up with the flu, So I emailed the broker right away. The night before I felt a little cruddy, but I was still okay to go. 3 a.m., I'm emailing the brokers and texting them, letting them know, listen, I can't do this. But then as soon as I got off sent him the email, I picked up the phone. I called 4 buddies of mine that are in the area, that I knew were in the area. and hoping one of them was empty, and two of them were empty. So when those two guys said, yeah, I can handle it for you, I gave them the MC number and the phone numbers of my buddies. I sent that in the next email. I said, listen, these guys are in the area. They could cover my freight. They could cover my commitment and make sure that you don't look bad to your customer. And when carriers do stuff like that with me, when they give me that same reciprocity of commitment and service, it goes a long way. I don't really, when I do hit those load boards and I do put loads up on the load boards, the carriers I hire, when I'm vetting them, before they even run that load for me, I am asking myself, is this somebody that I would like to put on that list? And then I try, depending on who's in the area, sometimes capacity is tight and you're left with who you're left with. But if I have the ability to vet a guy and hire out a better carrier, a better source, listen, he's based within 100 miles of my consistent freight, and he does like running this lane a lot. It's a little bit more expensive, but guess what? He is somebody that I can rely on a later date with a phone call. And then after that, I'll see how he performs on the first load, and then the rest is history. If he does a great job and he commits and he is punctual and professional and makes me look good to my customers, makes my customer smile, guess what? You're getting a phone call before that load ever hits the load boards on the next one. And I have a bunch of guys like that all over the East Coast and the West Coast.
And what technology or systems do you use to track your shipments?
I use Ascend TMS. So Ascend TMS has a tracker included with it. I'm not a huge fan of MacroPoint. I know it's the live tracking, like you can get minute by minute tracking on these guys. I'm not a fan of that because I don't want to get sued for, false allegations here, but I found it coincidental back in the day, a couple of times I would use MacroPoint when I was trucking, and then all of a sudden, that same broker that I ran that load for, they're calling me 3 days later saying, hey, listen, I got a load here for you, and I'm, seeing if you were in the area. And it's like, listen, I've never ran a load out of this area for you ever in my life. And somehow, I'm 450 miles away from the last drop that I did for you. And you're calling me on coincidence of me being within 20 miles of this load that you have. So there was a couple of shady things that happened with that. And they tried to get my business on the broker end too. And I explained what happened to them and they were surprised to hear it. But if it doesn't shut off, I can't trust it. If it's an app like that, I just don't trust stuff like that. And it's invasive. Like I said, I treat my drivers the way I want it to be treated as an owner operator. So I don't like, enforcing invasive stuff with them, but that also matters, even with the bigger companies, that have 200-300 trucks and you're dealing more so with the dispatcher than the driver. I need to be able to talk to that driver. If I need to call him, I need to know he's going to answer the phone call. I know a lot of drivers don't like that, but that's just the way I operate. If, I'm not going to bust your balls every 30 minutes like some of these other companies do, excuse my language. If I need you, I need to know I can get a hold of you. And if I can't get a hold of you, that's a big red flag to me, just in professionalism. And, sometimes my customer will call me with a last minute change or a last minute whoopsie or, hey, listen, can you, push him off for an hour because, the customer had an emergency and they're going to be an hour late, If I can't get a hold of that driver and relay the information right away, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And the next time that company calls, I may or may not hire them just because of the communication. Communication is one of the most important aspects of business. So if you can't communicate with the person that's actually got hands on your freight, it's a big issue for me.
And do you get any pushback from carriers when you request the pictures?
Only times I've ever gotten pushback on that is by dispatchers that were trying to be dishonest. A lot of times when that happens, I'll give them the rundown and I'll tell them, this is what I need from you. One of the other requirements we have, other than the pictures, when I ask for a COI, the certificate of insurance, with my company listed as a certificate holder, that is to come directly from the insurance company. Because I've caught a couple of dispatch companies sending me stuff that was photoshopped. Like they just took a generic COI, they photoshopped my company information on the certificate holder aspect, and I knew it was photoshopped. I had to cancel a load on them because I can't trust a carrier that's going to do that. So the certificate of insurance has to come directly from the insurance company also. So those two steps, a lot of time, 9 times out of 10, they stifle out the fraudulent guys. Driver-wise, I've never had pushback. The only time I've ever had pushback was when I was dealing with the shady dispatcher.
And finally, we know fast payment is critical for small businesses. What is the key for seamless payment processes from a curious perspective, and what documentation or actions do you need from them to ensure that they get paid quickly and on time?
The timeline for payment is going to be dependent on your contract with that broker. If you're not requesting quick pay from the broker, you're not going to get paid quicker than whatever that typical broker pays. I definitely can say clear and descriptive proof of deliveries and bill of ladings. That's important because that shows the proof that you delivered. I work with mainly a lot of smaller blue-collar industry customers, so I have a lot more hands-on or direct contact with my customers, I should say. So I always do a check call. Once a load is delivered, I call my customers who are the receivers, and I say, hey, listen, how was the service provided by this trucker? And then I also get confirmation from my customer that everybody's happy and whatnot, which definitely facilitates payment a lot easier. Most of my customers are on net 15. So that means I'm being paid within 15 days. I pay when paid. I've never liked owing people money. So as soon as my check hits the bank, I'm sending a check out, or an ACH, whatever you want to call it. That's just how I operate, but I know a lot of companies don't operate like that. So if you're dealing with a broker that's net 30, net 45, I've seen contracts as far out as net 90, you're probably better off either one, having a factoring company. I know there's a lot of pushback on factoring companies from carriers that don't believe in them, but there are a lot of benefits with factoring companies. Most of them do provide some sort of a credit check app, so you can do a little bit of a background check yourself on whatever brokers you're looking to work with to see if they're approved or not. Even if you're not factoring that particular load, you want to know, what that company's credit history is. Or if you're established enough in business and you have enough of a credit history on your own company, your own LLC, EIN numbers, go get yourself a credit line. Try to find a credit line from a bank, more so like a credit union. They have better rates. Banks like Bank of America and stuff like that, they're going to hit you with the high credit card rates. They're going to hit you with, the 0% APR for the first 6 months, and then you're going to get, accrued interest tacked on at 23% after 6 months. The credit agencies, in my opinion, are a lot easier to work with. They may not give you as much money as a high interest bank, because that's how the banks are making money, with the interest payments, but they're a lot easier to work with. They're a lot more personable to what you need, and usually they have better rates. They usually do have better rates, or at least I could say they usually have less fluctuation in rates, because you're not going to usually get that 0% initial. You'll probably be at between an 8 and a 10%, depending on what bank it is and how your credit score is for your company. But you're not going to be seeing the 23 to 24% spikes either on accrued interest.
And then, Anthony, as we close our conversation, if you were to start a small trucking business right now, again, is there something you would do differently? Is there new strategies you would implement?
To be honest, to be completely honest with you, I wouldn't. I would. And it's not really because I lost the love for trucking. I lost the love for the industry. And a lot of it was with the quality of carriers that were within the industry. It wasn't really even a broker issue. It was your fellow truckers. Camaraderie is gone. Nobody's there to help you no more. I can't tell you how many times I pulled over on the side of the road to help somebody out that had, a mechanical issue. That's unheard of. You pull into these truck stops, they're full of urine. Guys are throwing urine bottles out the windows, leaving the trash, everywhere. And then they wonder why it costs them $25 to park and $20 to take a shower, because, well, everybody's got to clean up after you. So rates spike. Every industry has ups and downs, peaks and valleys in regards to rates and payments and, and supply and demand. Rates right now today are starting to come back a little bit. They're not as bad as they were last year. It is possible. If I had no knowledge of just the crappy environments that you have to deal with as an over-the-road trucker, I would probably want to start a trucking company again. And, at that aspect of it, watch your financing. Make sure you make good financing decisions. Financial education is probably the most missed, but yet the most important aspect of running a business, especially in trucking. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment. your truck is going to cost, even if you bought a used older truck, like I started out with, it's still going to cost you in today's world $40,000 minimum to buy something that you can hop in, register, turn the key, and head down the road. So you need to make sure that you're financially educated. You know, you really can't just jump in with a blindfold on like you used to be able to do and learn the school hard knocks way. There's not enough money in it in today's world to be able to survive if you're just trying to roll with the punches and learn the old school way. Because that's how I learned. I did it old school. I took out a personal loan of $25,000, bought my truck, my Peterbilt, and still, that's my baby. I still have it today. And then from there, I built myself up. I leased on. I ran with a rented trailer until I could buy my own. But once all is said and done, even if you buy an old truck that you fix up like I did, you're still over $100,000 into your piece of equipment, and then another $100,000 every time you want to expand and try to, buy another truck, you buy another trailer. Now you got payroll taxes, and keeping your drivers happy and making sure that your repairs are done. And the more trucks you buy, the less work you can do on your own because you're only one person. So you got to take into account all your, maintenance costs and breakdowns and your what ifs. And there's always a what if on the side of the road. It's just part of the business. We beat on these trucks. We're driving on roads that are not maintained like they should be. You hit one bad pothole fully loaded and you're blowing a spring bushing or something like that. And now you're down for 2 days and it's costing you $3,000 to get the repair, at a shop. So having the money allocated for the what ifs, even, if you have a good month, don't go out celebrating. Don't go spending that money, on something, on a new motorcycle or something. You want 20, 30 grand in that bank account at all times for the what ifs. So the biggest piece of advice I can give to every single driver out there, you're driving 11 hours a day legally. Shut the radio off, shut the music off, and start buying ebooks. Get an Audible subscription. It's $8 a month. Start educating yourself. Learn about businesses. Learn about different types of businesses. The more you learn about every different business in the world, the more you're going to see that every business is more or less the same. Quality control is the most important aspect of any business. Making sure that your quality work is above par. That's what gets you return phone calls. That's what gets you your customer, whether you're working for a broker or a direct shipper or a contractor that needs you, whatever it is. The way you operate is what's going to depict whether or not that guy calls you back. Quality control is first and foremost, and educate yourself. Learn the different different tax write-offs, different, how to operate, how to get funding for certain things. You want to expand. Okay, how should you get funding? Should you just go get a credit card, or should you, seek private investors, or should you seek, a credit union opposed to a major bank? There's a lot of stuff to know in business, and there's, like I said, you're driving 11 hours a day. The average ebook is 8 hours. You can listen to a book a day if you really wanted to. You can see it in the owner-operators that pursue education and business education and financial education. You can see the difference between them and the ones who just have no clue about how to run a business. Just by the way you're talking, just within the first 30 seconds of you being on the phone with that individual, you'll know if they're worth the dollars that they're asking for or if they're not.
I love that insight. Thank you for your advice. I would like to close on that note because I think that was a great tip, actually.
Okay.
The way you invest your time. Thank you so much for joining me, Anthony. Your insights have been very valuable for me, and I'm sure it will be very valuable for our small carrier audience. For anyone watching, remember to subscribe to this Week in Trucking newsletter. We send you updates every Monday on where to pick up the best loads, and also interviews with carriers sharing their real cost per mile and profits. You can find the link to sign up in the description, and of course, leave us your thoughts for your questions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to This Week in Trucking to learn more about the industry and never miss a conversation like this one. Anthony, once again, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you. Drive safe.